Well, good morning. I hope your day is off to a good start. It's a busy time in Lansing, and this morning we'll talk about some of the issues that are under consideration with State Representative John Kavala. It starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Now, here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, John Kavala is serving his second term in the Michigan House of Representatives. He represents the 109th House District, which includes Alger, Luce, and Schoolcraft counties, and most of Marquette County. Prior to his election to the state legislature, Representative Kavala served 6 years on the Marquette City Commission, including 4 years as mayor. Actually, he and I served together for 4 years on the Marquette City Commission. Agreed most of the time, not all the time.
Not all the time, but you know, that's how good policy is made.
That's right, that's right. You know, there are a lot of issues to talk about, but I thought it might be interesting, first of all, to talk about being a legislator, because now you've got you've got one term under your belt under this new system we have. I shouldn't say it's new anymore, but under the term limited system. First of all, for anybody serving from the UP, travel has to be a big issue.
Travel
just getting to work every week.
It's about 50,000 miles a year.
Yeah. So you typically head for Lansing on a Monday?
Monday, usually I have Rotary at noon at the Holiday Inn, so usually after that I get in the car and head out. I've got another meeting this afternoon, so it'll probably be 2 or 3, but head down Monday and either head back Thursday night or Friday morning. And I prefer Friday morning rather than driving tired at night. You know, you drive that many miles, eventually time will catch up with you, and so I get up in usually about 6 in the morning, hit the road Friday.
Let's talk about the legislature now. It's really kind of a fast-track system. In the old days, people like Dominic Jacobetti and Joe Mack and Rusty Hellman and a lot of others could spend actually decades building up relationships. Sure. You have to do it a lot quicker now, don't you?
You have to do it a lot quicker because, you know, I'm in this job at max for 6 years. You know, if you're in the Senate, you're in the Senate for a max of 8 years. And so, yeah, you have to hit the ground running, and there's a lot of ways that you can do that. Just getting to know people, and you know, I guess I want to preface, most of the people I work with are just wonderful, great people. You know, everyone thinks that, you know, we're all attorneys that sit down there. I'm not the only auto mechanic in the House of Representatives. Peter Patalia owns an auto repair facility. So I work with contractors and teachers and retired firemen. It's really a melting pot. Excavators. It's a melting pot of the state. And so a lot of good people, and you know, you just from day one have to start making those relationships.
How important are those relationships? How do they work through the process when you're trying to get some legislation through?
Critical. And that's the advice I give people all the time when I meet with them, and they say, you know, what's the key? And I always say relationships. You build them, you use them when you need to, and you don't ever abuse them. And so if you can do that and people trust you, they'll work with you. I see a lot of my colleagues that don't. They'll play the partisan game, you know, those darn Republicans this, and every shot they get. Those are the people that get nothing done. The people that just kind of keep their mouth shut, work with people, you can have success.
Is it difficult living in Lansing a few days every week?
It is. You know, when I'm on a break, I get to the point where I'm itching to get back because I really like doing what I do. But once you're down there for a few weeks, you itch to get home every weekend. But it is. It's like living two lives almost. You know, when I come home, if you saw me at Econo Foods yesterday, I'm wearing, you know, my scrubby jeans and a t-shirt, and I was raking the yard. You know, now I'm wearing a suit and I'll live in a different house in a different town and have different friends, and so yeah, it's like almost like leading two lives in a way.
And I know you've done some things to build those relationships. You've had some social activities. You've cooked some dinners. I think you've done a lot of different things to.
We have, and you know, again, that promotes those friendships and relationships. And so I was fortunate to be able to acquire a house that's literally a block from the Capitol. And so we have quite a few dinners. As a matter of fact, tomorrow, one of my roommates and I are hosting the Macomb County delegation. There's about a dozen representatives from Macomb County, Republicans and Democrats. They're coming over. We're having a big cookout, and you know, after session, it's again, when you socialize, you really get to know people. And when you have a friend, they're less likely to let you down, and they're more than likely to help you when you need a hand.
Let's talk about the system, though, with the caucuses. Obviously, you're elected as a Democrat, others are elected as Republicans. Each has their own caucus.
Sure.
You know, what is the balance? I know you've tried to work in relation with other UP legislators.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to, there is some loyalty to party that's required. Isn't it?
Absolutely. You know, both parties have, you know, those issues that you'll absolutely fall on the sword to protect or defend. And when those types of issues come up, we're all there in unison together. Aside from that, there are issues that affect my area different than other areas of the state. For instance, guns and gun rights, okay? Now that's typically an issue where the Democrats in my caucus, they want to control them. They don't, you know, they see guns as evil, and they see what happens in schools and with crime. Up north, it's a whole different issue. We're taught, you know, to respect guns, to care for guns. We hunt, we do all those things. So when those issues come up, you know, Scott and I will be voting different than the rest of our caucus. And that's okay, because my leadership knows I need to represent my district and the values of my district. So there's times, you know, we're let off the reservation a lot. Take, you know, environment, very critical to everyone. But an environmentalist from Oakland County sees things differently than someone up here that lives in a district with 2 iron mines, a nickel mine, with forestry as abundant as it is. So the issues really kind of get mixed up sometimes.
So, you know, you've got to stay with the caucus when you can, but you've also got to express that independence when you can.
Yeah. You know, it was, I think, my first year, and I was approached by the leadership on a bill, and it was when we got the $4 million in propane funding put into the budget. I was asked to be a no on the budget, and I said, look, if that propane money's in there, I'm a yes. And it got, you know, heated,
right.
And he finally looked at me and he said, well, I'm not going to tell you how to vote, John. I said, well, that's good, because there isn't somebody in this building that could, you know. And we did get the money in it, and I voted for it. It was the right vote.
Just what about staff? What kind of staff are you able to have?
In the House, we each have 2 staff members. And so I've got, you know, my back staff person who does most of my policy work is actually a UP guy. He's been in Lansing quite a while. And then Nick Palmer is my front desk person. Nick was a graduate of Marquette Senior High School, so he followed me down there. And so I've got 2 guys, and I tell people I have the best staff in the House, in my opinion. They're both very hard working, they're very loyal, they're diligent. So we have a really good office setting.
And they're there to help constituents if
Absolutely.
they have some issues?
Right. You know, the legislature is just part of what we do. You know, being a representative matters. When you can't get your liquor license, we've had that issue many times, or your unemployment didn't come in the mail, or your kid got expelled from school and you need someone to talk to. Those are all the types of things we do, and we get reached probably 20 to 30 times a day.
Okay. We have to talk about Michigan's bumpy roads. We'll be back to talk about that with John Kavala in just a couple of minutes. We're talking this morning with State Representative John Kavala. I'd like to read you a quote from a Detroit News editorial. It says, many of those who were opposed to Proposition 1 expressed resentment the legislature punted the issue to voters in the first place. What's your reaction to those kinds of comments?
There's a lot of misinformation. The reason it had to go to the voters is because the Constitution says we can't make that decision. And so for the folks like this that think we didn't do our job, we had to get 2/3 of a majority in both chambers to even put it on the ballot. So had we been able to vote at this in ourselves, we would have done it. So, you know, I think the opposition to Prop 1, and I get it, it was very confusing and misleading. There was a big ad campaign against it that really made it more complicated than what it was. A lot of misinformation. And so now I think you won't see another ballot initiative. What I think you'll see is probably something painful to education and local government.
Who has to take the lead here? The legislature, the Republican majority, the governor?
Well, the Republicans have the majority in the House, and they have a supermajority in the Senate, and they have the governor's office. So it's their caucus. I mean, we've introduced some things that we felt could be supportive of roads, but it's really their baby at this point. I'll be there willing to work with them, but what I suspect is the Speaker is going to roll out a plan even this week, and I think it's going to be a substantial increase in the gas tax and probably a rollback of the sales tax on fuel.
Some people believe that the legislature should focus only on this issue before it gets tangled up with a lot of other issues. Does that make sense?
Well,
is that possible?
I agree it's a priority, but we're also in the middle of the budget process too, which is obviously very important. There's several other issues out there that are looming. Reforms to auto no-fault insurance, some prison legislation that's out there. So there's a lot of issues. And I don't think to come up with a plan and craft it is not essentially that difficult. It's getting it passed that becomes the challenge.
Is it possible to fix the roads without raising more revenue?
No. No. You know, we haven't had an increase in the gas tax since '97, and it's a flat tax. So 15 cents on diesel, 19 cents on gasoline. So average of 17 cents. That is per gallon. Well, in the last 20 years, we purchased less and less and less fuel every year. You know, they advertise pickup trucks at 29 miles to a gallon right now. We have electrics, we have hybrids, so we have decreasing revenue, and of course the cost of road repairs are climbing. So we're kind of at this gap right now.
Right.
And to really find, you know, $1.5 billion annually, it's just not possible.
Let's jump to electric power.
Okay.
We avoided a serious problem, a possible major rate increase,
Yep.
but it's a temporary solution. I know you've been working on some permanent solutions. What do you see as the challenges? Where should we be heading?
Well, a couple of things. I think we're going to see Presque Isle Power Plant shuttered probably in 5 to 7 years, and then replaced with generation out close to the Cliffs property. Now that'll be substantially smaller generation, probably natural gas fired. But I think 1 or 2 other smaller generation units across the UP, and then coupled with eventually a connection between the peninsulas, the electrification, you know, the one Michigan kind of idea, because right now we're dependent on Wisconsin for our transmission. Well, we saw in the past 2 years how that works when Wisconsin was able to shift all of those costs directly to the UP. So that bill was introduced. Senator Casperson introduced his bill a couple of weeks ago, and the House version got introduced Thursday. And I was able to go around and get 24 out of 25 members of the Energy Committee to co-sponsor this bill. So
Okay.
we think it will move fast. But that will really create a Michigan solution.
And this would allow us really to bring substantial power from
Back or
lower
forth.
Michigan, or back and forth between
Absolutely.
the two areas.
Absolutely. They're building a new 436 meg peaking plant in Gaylord, and the idea is to connect essentially from Gaylord to Marquette County. And everyone thinks about the straits, you know, that's kind of the big glamorous part, but it's really major transmission from Gaylord to Marquette County, and that will really allow us to move power back and forth as we need it.
And that's not something we can do now. They're pretty limited as far as what we can send across the straits at the present time.
It's very limited. It's like a orange extension cord. So
it's going to be a combination of generation
and transmission.
hopefully new transmission
Yep.
from lower Michigan.
Correct. And you know, it's going to be multiple years to get this permitted and built, but it's worthwhile. It will, you know, the best case scenario is our rates go up a little bit. I will be candid. There is not a scenario because of cost where I see rates coming down. I don't see it. When a company like UPCO has 12 customers per square mile, it's hard to serve that and have a low competitive rate.
I want to talk about some other issues. We'll get to those in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report after we take a break. We're talking with State Representative John Kavala. John, I want to do full disclosure, as they say when the financial reporters talk. The issue is no-fault insurance.
Sure.
I had a family member who benefited from the plan we have. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I pay the high rates too, so I understand there are a lot of sides to this issue. Where are we going, and how are we going to deal with this problem?
You know, auto no-fault is very expensive. I have 4 automobiles right now I'm insuring. You know, the plow truck and the kids' cars, and I pay a lot in auto insurance, and I get that. The bill that's down there right now, to me, doesn't do enough. We're giving up a lot, but we're really, they say $100 a year reduction, but the rate's actually coming down $36 now already, come July. So it's really a $64 savings annually for 2 years. That's all they'll guarantee. Well, our rates are nearly double our neighboring states. This is a bill that benefits insurance companies. They're already making a lot of money in the state. I would be in favor of some real reform but this isn't it. And certainly when you have $18 billion sitting in an account that they'll fight you to the Supreme Court to keep from opening their books, I think we got to start there.
Yeah. Certainly for those people who have experienced this, there are benefits.
Absolutely. It's the best care in the country.
I think many of these people would be bankrupt and living on welfare if it weren't for this.
Absolutely, system. I agree. There are some ways, though, that we can get some cost containment and still provide those services to them. You know, the cost of medical procedures, if you're on auto no fault versus regular insurance, the reimbursements by to the hospitals is sometimes 4 or 5 times as high as another insurance company, right. Or what Medicaid or Medicare will pay. So there's some things we could do that's real reform, but in my opinion, this isn't it.
Where do you think this is going to go?
You know, they don't have the votes on this in the House. The Senate passed it, but the House, the last I heard, the Republicans are 23 votes shy. That's a lot of ground to make up. So I think we scrap this bill and start over.
Recently, a bill passed in the House that allows a privately run prison to operate in the state of Michigan. Big plus seems to be jobs. Biggest negative, importing other states' prisoners. How did you feel about this legislation? I
was a no and a hard no for a couple of reasons. One, the company refused to be responsible if in fact someone escaped or if there was a riot and the police had to respond, the local police. They refused to have any financial exposure to that. So it really put a lot extra on the local units of government. The other thing it does is it opens the door to privatize prisons. And we see how private food service has fared in prisons, not very well. I don't think privatized prisons in Michigan is a good idea, and I think this cracks the door open for that. Okay.
State budget, where are we in that annual process?
So the Senate passed their version, which is much in line to what the governor wanted. The House passed its version, which is much more conservative. I was a no. There were some things I liked in the budget, some things I didn't, but right now it goes to conference committee where between the House and the Senate, they'll work out the differences and come up with one proposal for us.
What are the biggest sticking points, do you think?
You know, there's some related to education primarily. For an example, cyber schools under this budget will get the same reimbursements as the bricks and mortar, the Negaunee Public Schools or the Market Area Public Schools that are getting $7,800 a head. Cyber schools will get that too. And I don't think that's fair. Charter schools that are run for profit get that same. I'm not comfortable with that. Now, having said that, the budget does, for the districts, my school districts, it's the largest increase we've seen in years. So that part of it I like, but it's like, nah. So we'll see when it vets out.
You had an interesting discussion with economist Charles Ballard talking about the fact we should lengthen the school year and the fact that we're falling behind in this country, behind other countries.
I think so.
Probably not much political taste for that in the legislature, I would guess.
No, you know, there isn't. Now, we did approve a pilot program 2 years ago to do a year-round school in one district. I'm not sure the results of that yet, but you know, Michigan is a huge tourist state, and so I think to promote tourism is the biggest area. And I think with education, we seem to fight over how to grade students, how to grade teachers. We spend too much time focusing on that and not enough on real curriculum reform.
There's a lot more issues than this, but that's all the time we have. I'm glad you could come in and join us today.
Thanks for having me, Don.
Okay, we'll have you back again sometime.
Beautiful.
Our guest this morning, State Representative John Kavala, back with some thoughts on something else about the internet after we take this break. Well, today, if you want to know almost anything and have access to a computer, the information is easy to come by. Just use the internet. Google, Yahoo, Bing, whatever search engine you use, type in a question or a few keywords, and in seconds you have the answer. When I was in high school, I also used a search engine when I was looking for information for a school project. The search engine was under the hood of my car. I used it to drive to the public library to begin my own tedious search through the Encyclopedia Britannica. I know some people had encyclopedias in their homes, but that wasn't true for a lot of us. For me, it was the library. The process wasn't speedy and certainly not convenient, but it got the job done. One thing I know for certain, the information in the encyclopedia was always accurate. The internet, not always the case. It has a lot of useful information, but not every source is dependable. Now, in case you think that's a put down of the internet, it's definitely not. I love the internet. I'll be watching some actor in a TV show and ask my wife, what show do we remember him from? A moment later, one of us finds the answer on the internet. Me on my phone, her on her iPad. It's not that the information is always important or necessary. It's just that whatever you want to know, you can find it, even if it's not very significant. So, has the internet made us smarter? Hard to say. We know a lot more, but has that knowledge advanced our civilization? I think there's a difference between being knowledgeable and smart. People who are knowledgeable have a lot of information. People who are smart know how to put the information to good use. The real winners are those who have both. You know, and speaking of the internet, I've been trying to remember who was the actor who played the court clerk in the movie Anatomy of a Murder, filmed in 1959 in Marquette County. I'm going to check that out. I'll be back in 2 minutes. So the answer to my question before the break, who was the actor who played the county clerk in Anatomy of a Murder, is Lloyd Levasseur. In fact, if you do an internet search, what you typically come up with is a lot of different sites that tell you that Lloyd Levasseur is an actor known for Anatomy of a Murder. Now that's kind of right. There are also some people around here who would remember that in real life, Lloyd Levasseur was the Marquette County clerk from 1937 to 1963. The internet doesn't tell you everything. However, there is one place you can go for a lot of good information. For example, if you miss this show, want to watch it again, or recommend it to someone else, it will be available on the internet. Just go to uppermichigansource.com. The latest version is usually available starting at about noon tomorrow. And if you have some thoughts you want to share with us, our email address is theryanreport@chesstv.com. I'd really like to hear from you. Thanks to Representative John Kavala for joining us today. I think we have a better understanding of what's happening in Lansing as a result of our conversation. The Today Show is standing by and anxious to get started, so I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and please join us next Sunday morning. And now they can...